$500 million vanished from public view, not into the United States Treasury, not into the Federal Reserve, but into a bank account located thousands of miles away in Qatar. And that single decision has triggered one of the most explosive political controversies in Washington this year. According to testimony revealed in a Senate hearing, proceeds from the sale of Venezuelan oil seized during recent U.S. operations are being stored offshore, beyond the immediate reach of American courts, inspectors, and congressional oversight. At the center of the storm is Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who confirmed that while $300 million from the first oil sale has been distributed to approved Venezuelan institutions, a remaining $200 million is currently sitting in a Qatari bank account. That disclosure stunned lawmakers and instantly raised a flood of legal, ethical, and constitutional questions. The oil in question comes from roughly 50 million barrels of Venezuelan crude that fell under U.S. control earlier this year, assets now valued at close to $2 billion at current market prices. The administration began selling the oil to finance Venezuela's interim government, framing the move as a necessary step to stabilize a collapsing nation. The first transaction alone generated $500 million, and that is only the beginning. During a tense appearance before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee on Wednesday, January 28th, Rubio faced aggressive questioning that quickly shifted away from democracy and straight toward money. Senators wanted to know exactly where the cash was, who controlled it, and under what authority the administration was operating. Rubio's answer raised more questions than it resolved. He stated that the account belongs to Venezuela but is subject to U.S. sanctions, describing the United States as a gatekeeper that controls disbursement without technically owning the account itself. That distinction did little to calm critics. Lawmakers argued that if the U.S. military seized the oil, the U.S. government arranged the sale, and U.S. officials decide when the money moves, then ownership is a matter of semantics. Senator Chris Murphy openly questioned whether the United States was setting a precedent in which it acts as a global enforcer, taking assets by force, selling them, and storing the proceeds overseas. From the House side, Representative Lloyd Doggett reacted immediately, sending a sharply worded letter to both the State Department and the Treasury Department demanding transparency. He referred to the arrangement as an offshore account and demanded to know what legal authority allows the executive branch to act as custodian of foreign sovereign funds. His letter also questioned why the administration did not choose a jurisdiction with stronger transparency standards and a longer track record of managing oil revenues under international scrutiny. That question strikes at the heart of the controversy. The issue is not merely that the money is abroad, but that it is located in a country outside direct congressional oversight. Supporters of the decision argue that Qatar was chosen out of necessity, not preference. Venezuela owes an estimated $170 billion to international creditors, including Wall Street bondholders, major oil companies whose assets were seized years ago, and foreign governments. If the money were deposited in a U.S. bank, creditors could immediately seek court orders to freeze or garnish the funds, tying them up in years of litigation. From the administration's perspective, that would make the money useless for stabilizing Venezuela during a fragile political transition. By placing the funds outside U.S. jurisdiction, the administration believes it has protected them from legal seizure. Critics respond that protection comes at the cost of accountability. Unlike funds held at the Federal Reserve or within the U.S. Treasury, money in a foreign commercial bank is not subject to routine inspection by U.S. inspectors general. Senator Elizabeth Warren has been particularly vocal, warning that there is no clear legal basis for a president to create an offshore financial structure controlled by executive discretion. She has launched inquiries into whether major American banks were approached to handle the funds and declined due to legal risk. If U.S. institutions refused, critics argue, the move to Qatar becomes even more troubling. The scale of the operation only intensifies the concern. The $500 million already generated represents just the first sale. With tens of millions of barrels still under U.S. control, future sales could bring in another $1.5 to $2 billion. If all of that revenue flows into the same offshore mechanism, the administration would effectively control a multi-billion-dollar pool of money outside the normal budgetary process, Legal scholars warn that this could undermine Congress's constitutional power of the purse. Emergency economic powers allow the president to restrict commerce, but actively selling seized assets and spending the proceeds without congressional appropriation is far more controversial. Historically, seized assets are frozen, not liquidated and spent. The administration appears to be relying on emergency declarations related to Venezuela that date back several years, but those authorities were never clearly intended for this kind of operation. Treasury officials have attempted to downplay the issue, framing their role as technical rather than political, but lawmakers remain unconvinced. Additional letters from Congress are demanding to know whether any administration officials have financial ties to companies involved in transporting or selling the oil. Corruption is a constant concern. Venezuela's past is filled with examples of state wealth being siphoned off by elites, and critics fear the same patterns could emerge under a new banner. Rubio insists that safeguards exist, stating that the interim government submits monthly budgets and that expenditures are reviewed before funds are released. However, without independent auditors operating where the money is held, skeptics argue that oversight remains largely trust-based. On the ground in Venezuela, the stakes are immediate. The economy is shattered, infrastructure is deteriorating, and basic services depend on external funding. The $200 million sitting in Qatar represents a lifeline. If Congress forces the funds into U.S. jurisdiction and creditors seize them, the transition government could be starved of resources. That reality places lawmakers in a difficult position, balancing oversight against the risk of collapse. Meanwhile, pressure continues to build. Banks are expected to respond to Senate inquiries within days. The House Oversight Committee is preparing for potential subpoenas. Every transaction associated with the account is now under intense scrutiny. What began as a tactical move to shield funds from creditors has evolved into a broader confrontation over executive power, transparency, and the limits of U.S. authority. The account is no longer secret. The questions are multiplying, and the fight over Venezuela's oil billions is just getting started.